Hey y'all, so let's switch gears and talk about Airbnb. So there's still a lot of people who are looking to make money with Airbnb. It's still, a viable way to generate, passive income for yourself. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't own any property. Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss some strategies to get your Airbnb short-term rental business up and running without having to own a house or an apartment. Before I get into it, I do want to say that there are a lot of new updated regulations regarding short-term rentals in Airbnb, depending on what state you live. A lot of states are making it a lot harder to get into the Airbnb business because of the regulations surrounding short-term rentals. And for some states, it's for good reason. The market is huge for that, and there's a lot of investors who are buying up property and, using their apartments and their efficiencies to rent out for Airbnb, or for short-term rentals, making it harder for people to actually find a place to stay. People who actually need to rent for a longer term, So that's why there's a lot more regulations. So it's, each state has their own individual type of regulations. And so I would encourage you to look into it depending on what state you're in right now. I'll have a link to an article in my description that lists all of the states and all the regulations per state, so that you can, brush up on your, information when it comes to that. Because if you're in one of those states that is heavily regulated, you might want to, maybe reconsider how you approach starting an Airbnb business. But if you're not in one of those heavily regulated cities and you still want to get started with Airbnb, you can do so without actually owning property. There are several ways to start an Airbnb business without owning property. So I'm going to go ahead and start the list of those different ways. So the first way that you can start an Airbnb without having to own any property is the more popular option, which is the Airbnb arbitrage. So the gist of the Airbnb arbitrage is basically if you just rent a property, right, with the sole purpose of renting it out as a short-term rental or Airbnb. Basically, what you're going to be doing is subletting it on vacation rental sites. So for this to work, the money that you generate from this business has to be more than the rent that you pay or the business expenses that you have. Like I mentioned before you start this, you want to look at your city's regulations when it comes to subletting, okay? Because subletting is definitely something that is regulated depending on what city you are in. So you want to look at the rules and laws around that depending on what city you're in. Also, before you do this, you want to get permission from your landlord before you start renting it out to other people. So one of the pros of this particular method is that you don't really need a lot of capital to get started. You don't need a lot of money to get started. It's fairly inexpensive. You can leave 100% of the income for yourself, which is not the case with some of these other strategies. The cons is, like I mentioned before, a lot of cities have a lot of regulations regarding subletting, so it'll make it a lot harder to benefit from this particular strategy depending on what city you're in. And also, it could be very challenging to find a landlord who will allow you to do this. So how much money can you make with this strategy? At the end of the day, it really depends on your location and how large the unit or the property that you are renting out is. But if you do this right, you could earn up to 3 times more of the sum of your expenses. The key is to find a property that allows you to make at least $2,000 a month after all of your business expenses. The next strategy on how to get into the Airbnb business without having to own property is become a short-term rental property manager. This is probably one of the most straightforward ways to get into the Airbnb business. Short-term vacation rentals, that business is growing, it's booming. I mean, there's so much demand for it nowadays, and there's so much competition. So this is a way to get into the business without you actually having, first of all, of course, to own property, then also having to compete against all the other vacation rentals that might be in your areas. So not only is this career in demand, but it also allows a lot of flexible working hours. The key responsibilities of a property manager is basically managing the needs of the property owners. You're going to confirm bookings. You're going to be the one to communicate with the guests. You're going to be supervising the check-in process. You'll also be doing the marketing. You're going to be doing property inspections and, of course, organizing and cleaning and different maintenance tasks like that. So in order to become a property manager, like in any instance, you will need to look at the regulations, the legal regulations regarding property management in your state. For instance, some states might require a real estate broker's license in order to get into this business, or a property manager's license, while other states may not even require this whatsoever. So you just have to make sure that you look into that. So one of the biggest pros with this business model is that you have very flexible working hours. I mean, you basically, in this situation, you're an entrepreneur, so you can make your own working hours. And of course, the main topic of this video is that you don't need to own any property to get started in this business. So the cons is that you might need to further your education, which can be an expense. Like if you're required to get one of those licenses, it might be, a large expense. And also when you start to expand your business, managing properties for, multiple hosts can be kind of a challenging thing. The great thing about this strategy though is that there's so many different apps to use to make managing properties a lot easier. So how much money can you make being a short-term rental property manager? As of December 27, 2022, the average vacation rental manager in the US earns a total of $43,168. Okay, so about $44,000. However, the income frequently ranges from $34,000 to about $54,000 a year. So another way to get into the Airbnb business or vacation rental or short-term rental business without actually having to own property is to become the co-host for an Airbnb host. So co-hosts perform very similar duties to short-term rental managers, but the only difference is that they'll act more like an assistant to the host rather than the actual manager of the property. So with co-hosting, your main tasks will include confirming the bookings, of course, communicating with the guests, supervising the check-in and check-out process, property inspections, doing organizing and cleaning and maintenance tasks, restocking necessary supplies, writing reviews for the guests. So it's almost very similar to being a property manager, only in this case, you probably don't really need to be licensed to do it if your state requires that. So that's one of the biggest pros, is that you will not need a license to get into the co-hosting business. And your hours can be just as flexible as the property manager's hours. The con is that it'll probably be less profitable than being an actual property manager. And also the income will probably fluctuate. Typically co-hosts earn between 10 to 20% per booking. So for instance, if you co-host on an Airbnb that earns about $30,000 a year, you can expect to earn roughly $3,000 to $6,000 on that one property. Okay, so the next way to get into the Airbnb short-term rental business without having to own property is to join a vacation rental franchise. So if you don't want to start from scratch, and if you are kind of new to the whole Airbnb game, then this is probably a really good option for you. So in exchange for paying a fee, local property managers can get a special license from an existing franchise owner to use their resources and sell services under their brand name. So the pros of this business model is you get access to processes that have already been tried and tested, okay, because you're using someone else's business model. Also, one of the pros is that the territory that you're going to be working in will be protected and very much defined. Also, you will get training and ongoing support with this business. So one of the cons is that you won't have total control over everything because you won't be in charge of the branding and the guidelines and things like that. And also, one of the cons is that you'll have to pay an initial fee to join a franchise program. Also, this business requires a significant commitment because you'll have to sign a contract and you'll have to promise to be in it for a specific number of years. So how much money you can make with this business model, it really will depend on which franchise you choose. And there's also various different franchise companies that require different fees. So depending on which franchise program you join, you can pay anything from $55,000 to $100,000. All right, so the next way to be a part of Airbnb without owning any property is to become an Airbnb consultant. So if you already have experience, with Airbnb rentals and you would like to help other entrepreneurs grow their business, this is a really good business opportunity for you. You'll have to, of course, be experienced in owning, short-term rentals, how that business works. You'll also need to have experience in how to market your brand because you have to market yourself. So as an Airbnb consultant, you will help the hosts maximize their bookings, improve their ranking, and possibly teaching them how to buy and sell short-term rentals. One of the biggest tips too with this is that you will want to identify a niche. This is the key to having a successful Airbnb consulting business. Okay, so what are the pros of becoming an Airbnb consultant? The biggest pro is that your upfront starting costs will be very minimal. Also, you can position yourself as an expert. And of course, the biggest pro, like with all of these things, is that you won't have to actually own property yourself. One of the cons is that you will have to have prior experience as an Airbnb host. And also, you'll have to be self-motivated because this is a very entrepreneurial type of career. On average, the salary for an Airbnb consultant is around $60,000 a year, a little bit more than that. Another cool way to get started at Airbnb without actually having to own property is to start an Airbnb cleaning service. Typically, the first task that hosts outsource is cleaning services. This means that you'll have no shortage of work. So to start out becoming an Airbnb cleaning service, you just want to do your research. See what other Airbnb cleaning services are offering. What are they actually doing? What do their packages look like? How do they price their services so that you can actually, compete? And then also research industry standards as well. It's also important to see if your state has any requirements such as like licensing or insurance. Also make sure to factor in expenses as well, like cleaning products, equipment, labor, things like that. The biggest pro of this business model is that there's no shortage of business out there. Many Airbnb hosts need cleaning services. Actually, all of them do, right? So there's no shortage of business out there. Also, the startup costs are going to be, of course, way lower than if you were to buy your own vacation rental property, right? One of the cons is that you'll have to do your own marketing, of course. Also, you will have to find a reliable team, to create an actual cleaning business. So how much does an Airbnb cleaner actually make? On average in the US, the hourly amount is about $18 an hour, which is 41% more than the national average. However, if you're self-employed and you're working on your own, the minimum would be about $25 an hour to have a livable wage. So per month, cleaners can make anything from between $900 to a little bit over $7,000. It could become a very lucrative business if you know what you're doing. For example, there's a business called Made This, and they gross about $100,000 a month. Another way to get into the Airbnb business without actually having to own property is to host an Airbnb experience. So Airbnb Experience is a platform launched by Airbnb in 2016. So if you join the program, you can offer a wide range of activities that guests can book during their stays, such as a traditional guided tour. If they're in a place where there's a lot to see, you can become a tour guide. You can do a cooking class or an art class. If you have a specific hobby or a skill that you're really good at, this could be something that you can actually consider offering as opposed to just hosting, an actual Airbnb. So what are some of the pros of becoming an Airbnb experience host? Of course, the biggest pro is that you can generate money while sharing your hobby or passion. Also, with the introduction of online experiences, you can do this from the comfort of your own home. One of the cons is that depending on what business that you have to offer, you might have to be licensed to do this. So how much money can you earn as an Airbnb experience host? Some hosts earn anything between $25 to $150 per guest. Some top earning hosts have made up to $20,000. Another way to get into the Airbnb business without actually owning property is to become an Airbnb photographer. So it's pretty much self-explanatory. So one of the ways you can get into the business is one, by becoming just a freelance Airbnb listing photographer, and then you could get listed by Airbnb, or you could advertise your services using, Fiverr, Upwork, or Instagram. So one of the biggest pros with this business model is that you will have very flexible working hours. And also one of the pros is that you'll be able to travel to various different places. So that'll be really cool. Cons is that, of course, photography equipment can be very expensive. And also one of the cons is that you'll have to market your services. So on average, Airbnb photographers make about $50,000 a year. Another way to get into the Airbnb business without owning property is to become an Airbnb copywriter. Now, I will say that with the advent of AI technology, this might be one of those businesses that might become obsolete kind of soon here. But for now, I guess there's still some business out there for a human copywriter. So this could be something to get into for now. Basically, all you're going to be doing is just writing catchy titles and descriptions for the Airbnb hosts, and maybe even possibly writing house rules for the guests. as well. Pros in being an Airbnb copywriter is that the hours are flexible. Also, it requires very little upfront investment. One of the cons, though, is that you need to be self-motivated, of course, because you have to market yourself. And then also, like I mentioned, you have to compete against ChatGPT. But on average, Airbnb copywriters make about $90,000 a year. The next way to get into the Airbnb business without owning property is vacation rental marketing. So to get ahead of the competition, a lot of property owners or hosts have to learn how to market themselves properly. A lot of these hosts don't have the knowledge that's required to properly market themselves online, and so they seek outside help in order to market their listings. Now, if you already have marketing skills, you know about SEO, you know about online marketing, digital marketing, and things like that, this is a very lucrative business to get into. Vacation rental or short-term rental marketers offer these services. They offer social media marketing, email marketing, content creation, SEO, SEM, lead generation, and website design. One of the pros of being a marketer for Airbnb hosts is that there's a minimal upfront cost. Also, it's easy to operate it if you know what you're doing. Cons is that you'll have to have the necessary skills to make this actually work and be profitable. But on average, Airbnb marketers make about $75,000 a year. So that is a list of 10 ways to get into the Airbnb business without actually owning property. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you plan to get into the business. Which one do you think you might want to do? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to join the tea party, and until next time, y'all, bye.